Hey, what's up, everybody? Hugh here. Just wanted to give a quick precursor to this episode. First off, I think you should listen to it. It's an epic conversation that I was just humbled and flattered to be a part of. But I will say that the content's heavy. It's about the pro-life work and sort of the ins and outs of the pro-life movement that Blaise does and the topic of abortion. And anyway, yeah, so just been rolling along. I've had a lot of people reach out saying that they've been enjoying the episodes and but just a lot of younger people too have been saying that. So anyway, I would describe it as PG. Maybe I'll rate it as PG. It's great, but it's got some heavy content in it. So yeah. Anyway, give it a listen. Hope you enjoy. But just wanted to mention that first before you jump into it. So okay, we'll catch you in the episode. Bye.
I'll go ahead and hit record. And yeah, Blaise, thanks so much for doing this, man. I super appreciate it. And yeah, it's just pretty flattered that you're coming on for this. So
hey, I'm glad to be here. I'm flattered that you're reaching out. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, man. Yeah, and I think actually what was it, like 5 months ago or something? I had originally reached out. So,
yeah.
So it's been a long time coming, but appreciate it. So yeah, I guess so. Just for introductory sake, who are you and what do you do and that type of thing?
So my name is Blaise, and I work as the Eastern Strategic Initiatives Director for the Canadian Centre for Bioethical Reform. Canadian Centre for Bioethical Reform, CCBR, we're an educational pro-life group. So we seek to educate the public on the issue of abortion to change hearts and minds in order to save lives and spare people the trauma of abortion. Yeah. So through my role, I work, I'm based in Toronto. I work here in Toronto, but I support other groups across Eastern Canada to educate their communities on abortion. We use human rights apologetics and abortion victim photography in order to educate the public. So that is my day job. I also volunteer as the vice president on the board of Toronto Right to Life, which is a pro-life organization that does basically the same thing, but anchored here in the GTA.
Yeah. Well, it's a lot. It's a lot going on. So, yeah. So, I guess first, like your activism, which I've seen you do. That's the only part of your job I've seen you kind of do hands-on.
Yeah.
And then, so that's like in the streets with kind of conversing with people.
Yeah.
Sort of the front lines, as it were. And then you had mentioned before we hit start there that you're doing like some talks and just educating people. So
yeah.
How's that? How do you get involved in that? Where does that come from? Who are the groups, and are there a lot of them out there that are doing
it? Okay. So there's two layers to the education that we do. The primary goal is to educate the public. So to make the case that human rights for all human beings, they should start when the human being starts, which you know from science is that fertilization, and to show people the faces of the victims of healthy children with ultrasound photos and abortion victim photography.
Right.
So that's the primary mission, to educate the public. That's where the activism projects come in. Yeah. So we met, you came and joined the Toronto Against Abortion project for a day. We did Choice Chain. So that's our street outreach project.
Yeah.
We also have a postcarding project where we go door to door and drop off leaflets at the doors. We also have a door knocking project where we go door to door, knock on the door and have conversations with people who are open to it. So those are kind of the three most common projects that will be deployed in a community.
Yeah.
I guess we have some other projects. We have truth trucks with trucks with billboards on the side of them. And we have a video truck with LED screens as well. So those are run by staff, whereas the volunteers will get involved in street outreach or postcarding or door knocking.
Yeah.
So that set of projects is how we do activism to reach the public in Canada with the truth about abortion, the apologetics and the abortion victim photography.
Yeah.
The second layer of education is, in order to educate the public, we need to educate pro-lifers. So we need to teach pro-lifers the apologetics. We need to explain to them the strategy. We need to motivate, equip, inspire people to get active and get involved.
Yeah.
So that's where a lot of the speaking that I do comes in. Would be, speaking for a Right to Life group or at a pro-life conference or for a pro-life campus club, to train and equip and inspire people to get involved and get active in the mission to reach the public. So, there are a lot of groups that we work with through the pro-life movement, and in particular, what I would call the End the Killing movement. End the Killing movement are the groups that are partnering with us with this particular pro-life education. Right. So there's pre-existing groups that have been around for a long time, like Toronto Right to Life is much older than CCBR. It's like 50 years old. Yeah. Toronto Right to Life is a partner on End the Killing, like Toronto Right to Life and CCBR partner on End the Killing activism projects. Right. So there are some groups that have been around for a long time that do a bunch of other things and also partner with this kind of public education. Yeah. And then there are a lot of groups that have formed, informal volunteer groups that have formed just to do this kind of stuff. So a few days ago, I was with New Brunswick Against Abortion, group of volunteers that formed earlier in 2024 to get together and run Choice Chain in Moncton and St. John, New Brunswick. Yeah. In a few weeks, I might have a chance to visit with Halifax Against Abortion again. They started a year and a half ago, group of volunteers getting together in their city to do Choice Chain, right? So there are lots of groups like that, maybe 20 or 25 across the country. A handful of them pre-existing pro-life organizations. A lot of them just new. Independent volunteer activism teams just running those projects in their cities. Niagara, Waterloo region, York region, Durham, Windsor, London, just people getting together to run these pro-life education projects in their communities.
Oh, well, that's amazing. That's very exciting. Yeah. That's... And they're all like that recent, like within the last 2 years kind of thing.
So a lot of growth in the last couple of years. So CCBR was founded in 2001. The first 10 years of the organization was really being connected with campus clubs and trying to bring abortion, victim photography, and apologetics to Canada, to the pro-life movement in Canada. But in 2011, CCBR launched the End the Killing Plan, which is a comprehensive theory of change strategy to like, how do we bring about an abortion-free Canada? Well, we need to reach everyone with the essential effective tools of public education. We need to reach everyone with the abortion victim photography, the photos of the victims, and the human rights apologetics. So 2011 is when CCBR started to try and systematically spread across the country, directly and indirectly through working with partner groups and volunteers to bring these projects. And, Niagara Against Abortion started 10, 12 years ago. Right. I started as a volunteer at the Toronto Against Abortion project in like 2013, 2014. It was just U of T Students for Life activism team at the time, but it grew into Toronto Against Abortion. Yeah. So some groups date back a decade or more running these projects, whereas in the last year and a half, probably about 10 new groups have popped up in Eastern Canada. Wow. Yeah. We ran a big tour in 2023, and with growth and a tour, like there's been a lot of growth, but awesome. Maybe another 10 of those groups have been around for 5 or 10 years already. Right. So it's a growing movement. Yeah. And certainly east of Ontario. It's since 2021 that there was Montreal Against Abortion started, and since 2023 that we've had groups in Atlantic Canada. So it's growing into new provinces. Yeah. But Ontario for about a decade.
Yeah. Holy cow. Man, that is unbelievable, the growth. So that's kind of the fruits of the pre-existing work that you've been a part of, would you say? Like, this isn't coming out of a vacuum per se. Like, this has been... There's been some... planting, I guess, been going on in those areas. And now we're starting to see like the rewards of your guys' work. Is that correct?
Yeah, for sure. So I've experienced that both from the volunteer and the staff side. Yeah. Like briefly in 2012, when CCBR had launched the End the Killing Plan, they ran a tour. I say they because I wasn't on staff at the time. Right. I was just volunteer in Toronto. They ran a tour from Vancouver to Ottawa to kind of kick off the End the Killing Plan and inspire people. That's part of what inspired me to take on leadership in Toronto, to restart the activism team at U of T Students for Life and start up what became Toronto Against Abortion. Yeah. And then on the staff side, I had a chance to do the same kind of thing. I was one of the key speakers on the eastern part of our Faces Against Abortion tour in 2023, where we're doing the same kind of thing, but new territory. We went to Quebec and all 4 Atlantic provinces, as well as crisscrossed Ontario. And there was a separate Western team hitting the Western provinces. But there, I had a chance to help plan the tour and to be one of the key speakers on the tour, to invite people to get involved, the same way that I had been invited 10 years prior.
Yeah.
And to see people do that in Halifax, in New Brunswick,
Yeah.
like that's been really neat to be on both sides of that.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I mean, so it's amazing that people are receptive. And is this, who are the people that are joining? Like, why is there I guess there's almost two questions in this, but like, I want to get into this later on, but like the greater cultural movement towards culture of death, I suppose. Like, where does, I'm not going to ask you that now, but like, I'm curious as to where that even comes from, or why that's been so hushed and rampant in Canada as well, or like the world, but in Canada. And why now are there people being more receptive, do you think? Like, where does that involvement or like the desire to get involved come from? Who are these people that you're speaking to?
I think that the people who are getting involved in the End the Killing movement are doing so because they see the effectiveness of the pro-life education, and they see other people doing it, and they're inspired to join and get involved. So it's not because of some external factor with what's going on, with the issue of abortion in Canada right now. It's because there is a growing movement of people standing up in defiance and saying, this is not okay, and we have a broken and wounded culture, and this is an emergency. And, asking, like, what right do I have to a normal life when children are being killed every day? And then people in different ways finding a way to make protecting preborn children a priority in their life, whether that's the growing number of people who are joining staff with an organization like CCBR, or the number of people, like we had, over 50 interns between Calgary and Mississauga the last 2 summers, people who give up 2 to 4 months of their summer to make it their full-time job, or the growing number of volunteers who make space in their everyday lives for protecting preborn children. So, it's, for a lot of people, it's seeing photos of abortion victims or seeing video of abortion victims that, as pro-lifers, we might be, many of us grow up pro-life by default, but it's once you come face to face with the victims that abortion's not just about a what, but it becomes about a who. It's not just this abstract issue that like, oh yeah, like I'm against that, but it's like, there are individual human beings who are being killed every day. And I think that's the first piece, is feeling the weight of abortion. That's the first piece for people getting involved. The second piece is being invited to do something, and something effective that works. Right. So when you feel the weight and you're broken, like I think we all should be, seeing the broken bodies of preborn children, but then you're given something to do about it. Like, look, it's not rocket science. It takes a few hours of training, but you can get involved with the local activism team, or come to a crash course in Toronto, or come do a summer internship, or invite a speaker into your church or your campus club or something, and given something concrete to do about it that works. So the other piece is, yesterday I was doing outreach at Toronto Metropolitan University, and I talked to a guy for about 6 or 7 minutes, and he was drinking a beer or something. I was talking to him, and I wasn't really sure where the conversation was going to go, but he came in being like, yeah, okay, I can see how abortion's bad in some ways, but it's a woman's choice. And as I talked it through with him, like, I thought we had more to talk about, but he stopped at one point. He's like, no, you know what? You're right. It's always wrong. Like, you've convinced me. He goes, shakes my hand, walks on his way. Right. That was just the most recent conversation I had yesterday. Now, it's not that everybody changes their minds, but that we see the progress. We see people shift, and we see people change their minds entirely. We've done polling too that shows that 67% of people who see abortion victimography and human rights apologetics have increased negative feelings on abortion. So people feel the weight that, I've got to do something about this. It's not just some issue on a list, but it's an emergency. And then we connect them with something to do about it that works, that you can see the results and you can see the fruits of. And that's why I think the movement is growing.
That's so true and fascinating. It's almost like a very simple like procedure. It's like, here's the problem, here's the solution. And you're absolutely right. Like, I remember the first time I saw a Show the Truth sign, I was about 12.
Yeah, I
maybe?
was 11 when
Yeah.
for me. Yeah.
And it, like, I remember the photo exactly. And I remember the moment seeing it.
Yeah.
And like the utter collapse of emotion that I had seeing it. And I knew what abortion was, but I never really come face to face with it in that way. And it was at the Pro-Life Walk, the March for Life in Canada.
Yeah.
Anyway, and I saw that, and you're right. Like, immediately it evoked such a weight of emotion that I almost felt despair. And
Right.
then the worst part too is after you see it, then like we were there, we were finishing up the march, and then it's on the way back kind of thing. Anyway, so I see these photos and these people, and then the weirdest thing is I was plunged into this really heavy feeling, and then we just got on the bus, and people, like, someone was playing music, and I was like, and then we were like stopped at a gas station or something, and I was like, what are we doing? Like, this is crazy. So, and I don't know if you saw the movie Sound of Freedom, but
I haven't seen it. I heard about
it's
it.
a heavy film.
Yeah.
A guy like you, I imagine, could take it, but I don't know. I think of myself as pretty resilient in these types of situations, but it was a similar thing after seeing that movie where I was like, this is a reality. Like, this is something that is currently happening. Like, I'm sitting here now in this second, and some other human is experiencing that.
Right.
But, like, at this moment.
Right.
So, you know what I mean? Like, it's crazy that you could be listening to, I don't know, even this podcast. If whoever's listening to this podcast, they'll be sitting here listening to this, and at the same time, there are, abortion victims and, like, these, like, sexual abuse victims. That's just going. So you're right. Like, the emergenciness of it is intense, and but the beautiful thing about your guys' work is that it does offer something to do, and that's very profound that you have an opportunity to work at that, because that alleviates the weight of despair that kind of comes from seeing those things.
It can give a direction.
Yeah, because that, I don't know if you have any thoughts on this too, but in the pro-life movement, there's sort of two camps that I've seen, where one is pro signs and graphic imagery, and the other is against it. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's, like, I wouldn't want to show my 5-year-old a sign of this, but I'd rather the public know about this reality and be faced with these realities and have my 5-year-old see that than to not have my 5-year-old see it and sacrifice their, like, emotional stability, or I don't know what the word is, but you know what I mean? And so anyway, it's kind of interesting to me that this is like a dichotomy that's going on. And, but I think you're right. Like, if you do see the signs, then you have something to do about it, that offers you a way out. But if you just see the signs, but you don't have anything to do about it, that's where I had lived for a few years after that, which was like, well, I don't,
right.
I'll go to the pro-life march and I'll try and get involved where I can, but I don't know what else I can do about it other than sort of live the gospel in my daily life and be against it and stand up for this issue.
Right.
But to actually be able to be around that topic and be able to act on it is very important. Like, right. the action of fighting against it. And I will say one other thing. It is no small, for the listeners, it is no small job doing the activism at TMU. Like, that day was, we can get into that later, but for these people listening who hear you talk to a guy with a beer, like, that is warfare. Like, the atmosphere is a war zone in there. So anyway, but you were going to say something.
Yeah, well, just like everything you're saying right now reminds me so much of the Faces of Abortion tour that we ran last year.
Yeah.
So we were doing activism by day, and we reached all 10 provinces, but then we had the tour talk every night. And the journey that we tried to take people on with the tour talk, there were 3 sections of the talk. The first was reflecting on the role of the human face, because there's something about the face that makes visible the person.
Yeah. Wow.
And reflecting on the use of abortion victim photography, like that term was coined about 11 years ago by Dr. Monica Miller in the States. Before then, people just refer to the photos as graphic images. But abortion victim photography gets more specifically at what we're at, right? It's not just photos of abortion. No, they're photos of children, of people who've been killed by abortion. And Miller has so much to say about this. It's really interesting. She says that it's a mistake to think that the more bloody and gory a photo will be, the more effective it'll be. The most effective photos are the photos that show the humanity of the victim, and that we need people to see and recognize the child amidst the awful tragedy and violence. It's the juxtaposition of seeing the horror of what's been done to an individual human being. That's the power in victim photography. And frankly, that's true beyond abortion. We see lots of other movements have used victim photography throughout history or even during the present day. But it's seeing the humanity of the child and that the human face has a special role to play. Then we brought people face to face with abortion victims, playing one of the most harrowing abortion videos that I have seen. And I have seen many abortion videos in the last 20 years. I've been involved in the movement, from 5 children in particular who were recovered from a Washington, D.C. abortion clinic by abortion activists who I've met in March of 2022. And just being face to face with these 5 unique, individual, unrepeatable children. I mean, I remember at the Waterloo stop of the talk, this was maybe like the 11th time that I had given this talk and shown this video to an audience, and I was tearing up watching it. And probably the 60th or 70th time that I'd seen the video. But it was still moved me every time. So we bring people face to face with the abortion victims in order to feel the weight. But then the second third of the presentation was about processing that with people, right? So you say that feeling of despair, and our goal was to take people from despair to defiance. Defiance is the third section. So to process that emotion and that feeling, like we should feel the weight, we should feel the brokenness. There's this essay by a man named Kostler during the Second World War, who was trying to wake the public up to the victims of the Holocaust, to the genocide going on. And this phrase, we the screamers, he's basically processing like, okay, well, am I crazy to be so focused on this injustice? Or is society crazy to be indifferent and to go about acting as if nothing's going wrong? And just trying to process those emotions and process those feelings, but then channel them into the third section, which is defiance. Like, I think there are, when we're confronted with the reality of abortion, what do our faces show? Is it indifference? We're just trying to move on with our day-to-day life. Is it despair, like there's nothing that can be done? Or is it defiance? Can we stand up with effectiveness, with purpose to fight and push back? So I guess with everything you were saying, the tour talk comes to mind both on, that's the journey we try to take pro-lifers on, to invite them to get involved in an effective way and to feel the weight, but to channel it. And then the role that victim photography has to play, like, look, what we're trying to do is the most effective thing. If there was evidence that the most effective way to change hearts and minds on abortion and save lives and spare people the trauma of abortion was to not use abortion victim photography, then we would not use abortion victim photography. The reason we use the photos of the victims is because it is the most effective tool. It's worked for successful social reform movements in the past, like the British abolitionists fighting the slave trade and slavery, the anti-child labor movement. I'm working my way through Martin Luther King Jr.'s Why We Can't Wait, because we look at the civil rights movement and the role of visual evidence to expose injustice, confront the culture with that, even if it makes you unpopular. That's a pattern we see through the history of successful social reform. So it worked in the past, and it works now. We see,
you see
the results on the street every day, and we see it in the polling. And it's not that it isn't difficult to see the photo. Like, I saw a photo of an abortion victim when I was 11. My kids have seen the photos. My kids have come with me to outreach when they've been, toddlers or in a baby carrier.
Yeah.
And now when they're like 9 to 12, they've come along, they've witnessed it. Like, kids, like, we don't target children who are too young to have an abortion.
Yeah.
If you're old enough to have an abortion, you're old enough to see and talk about abortion.
Yeah.
But beyond that, like, we don't set up in front of an elementary school or daycare or something like that.
100%. Yeah.
But when we're out in the public, there will be some children. There's few on a university campus, but sometimes there are children there. When you're downtown, there could be children, even though it's not a place where primarily children congregate. And when children see the photos, they have this innate recognition. It's like, what happened to the baby, right? Like, they see the humanity of the child right away. And it can be very easy to explain from a pro-life perspective. Like, look, we're trying to protect babies because sometimes, when a baby's in the womb, people can't see it. They don't know that he or she's a baby. We're trying to show the ultrasound photo, show that there's a baby there, and show that it's bad to do this to babies so that we can protect babies and all babies can be safe, right? Like, you can explain it to a child.
Yeah.
I don't know how you'd explain that to a child if you're in support of abortion. That would be a very difficult thing to explain why you think it's okay, because children innately see there's something wrong. So as long as you can explain to them that they're safe and what we're trying to do is save babies, they get it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I don't think that the photos harm children.
No, I think
otherwise
you're right.
I wouldn't show them. But I think that people who are old enough to have abortions need to see them.
Yeah.
And if abortion was a historical injustice, we could leave the photos to a textbook.
Yeah.
But given that nearly 300 children are decapitated, dismembered, and disemboweled in Canada every single day, there's an urgency to go into the public square with the faces of the victims to reach people.
Yeah.
But the victim photography comes into the defiance piece in terms of, we need to do what is most effective to save lives and change minds. And that's where the evidence from history and the evidence today points to victim photography, and the combination with that and the apologetics, so we can have effective conversations.
I think you're absolutely right. And just like two thoughts on that. First, the conversation of apologetics has to take place from a spirit of emotion. Like, you need to invoke an emotion and then explain to the other the emotions that they're feeling. It's like, okay, well, why do you care so much? Or what is this? Like, even just that day we were out there, again, that was probably one of the most like emotionally jarring things I've gone through, to be honest. I am not I'm confrontational in some ways, but definitely was exposed for how weak I was at that day. I was like, this is like you and Katura and Josh, and who was the other girl there?
Might have been Christina, maybe.
Someone, There was a few. There was like 4 or 5.
Yeah.
But anyway, I was just like in awe watching you guys, and I was like shaking the whole time. And I remember beforehand we showed up, and I was there about half an hour early, just on TMU, in like the center of their campus. And I was walking around, and I was like, we are about to become public enemies from one around here. I was like, all hell was about to break loose, and it did and it didn't. People went about their business, but certainly a lot of people were angry. But then the other thing, a lot of people were like, thank you, and where can I get in touch with this group? Like, I took some information with people, just to get in touch.
Yeah.
And I did have a few experiences of my own where people were very receptive to the conversation, even though I was I couldn't even think. I was like babbling on. They were like, and then like, what if so? And I was like, I'm trying to remember my training that Katura gave me, but no, that emotion, the sign invokes emotion for the conversation to take place. So I 100% agree with the signs and and I've got to stop saying that, because you're right. The abortion victim photography. I agree with you. Abortion victim photography. That's in my mind. But the other thing too is that regarding children, I think that I don't have any kids. You do have children.
Yeah.
But I've seen other people who have children who are involved in the pro-life movement, and I think 2 positives. I don't really think there's any negatives that I've seen or heard of at all, actually. But the positives are, the earlier you get your kids involved, the more equipped they are to deal emotionally with this reality and not be frozen around it. Like, I have friends who were in the Show the Truth movement as like children. They went with their parents and they did a similar thing. And some of them were disputing people on the street, like doing activism on the street at like 10 or like 12 years old, you know?
Right.
And their ability to think it's like they have a training for warfare. Their ability to stay calm and think rationally and appeal to the humanity of the person in the conversation they're dealing with, rather than see them as an enemy, is way above my own. Whereas I was around the pro-life movement. We did a lot of silent protests outside of different clinics, or maybe Life Chain or whatnot, but not that much activism. And so that's one positive. And the other positive I would say is that as a kid, you're right. Like, they recognize the humanity of the abortion victim photography. Like, they see that. And there's like a genius to a child, which is that they instinctively know what's right and wrong, and they get it right away. The other thing is that they're kind of emotionally ill-equipped to deal with the grandeur of it. And so they don't think of, like, when I first saw it, I could comprehend that this was a problem that was happening right here, right now, and on such a grand scale, and I felt so helpless with it. But as like a 5-year-old, I don't think you really capture all that. You're like, whoa, that's bad, and now I'm going to make sense of it. So in some sense, their lack of emotional depth, I think, protects them more than we give them credit for, as well as they're a little smarter than we give them credit for that way. Like, they're quite astute. So anyway, that's kind of an interesting, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but that's,
I agree with that. And, you know, on the streets we see kids respond as their parents respond. So I've never seen, like, in the 20 years I've been doing outreach, and 10 years pretty regularly, I've never seen a child get upset on the streets. I've seen children get uncomfortable if their parents are really upset, like yelling or swearing or something like that, which I can understand why that would be upsetting, right? But even that, like, I struggle to think of concrete examples of that happening. The people who often get angry saying, you know, what if my, what if a child saw that? Like, I think of one time at the University of Toronto Scarborough campus where somebody was saying, like, you know, why are you showing these photos here? Like, you know, there could be children around. Now, first of all, on a university campus, it's one of the most childless places you can go. But he points around and he looks and he says, like, look, there's a kid over there. And my friend Talia turns and looks and sees me and my daughter Gabriella sitting on the grass. I was keeping an eye on the team with my daughter, who was like preschool age. She hadn't started school yet. So she's with me during the day. I was a part-time stay-at-home dad at the time. And Talia's like, oh, Gabriella over there? Like, she's with us. Like, you know, the one kid in sight is perfectly content, understands that we're trying to save babies at whatever level, a 4-year-old can understand. Now, getting back to what you were saying earlier, tying it together, I think that there's an ethos, there's a spirit, an approach that we try to instill in people who are doing outreach to us, rather outreach with us. And it's really a requirement of doing End the Killing outreach. There's a sense in which it is combat. That is, we're combating the injustice of abortion. But when we're dealing with individual people, we want to approach it from the perspective of common ground rather than combat. Like, we're not looking for a Ben Shapiro destroys video moment, right? Like, it's there. Like, you said that we're trying to evoke emotion. Aristotle said effective communication is ethos, pathos, logos. So ethos being character, pathos being the emotion, and logos being the logic, the message. Mortimer Adler puts it in plain English, saying, first you need to build a bridge. And that's finding common ground. That's connecting with the individual human being you're talking to. Then touch the heart. And we use analogies, stories, and the photos of abortion victims to touch the heart and awaken the moral imagination. And then, and only then, can you deliver the message. And we do that with, you know, clear, simple science, human rights, and effective questions. You know, there's some training in the apologetics, but it's like, you know, 2 hours of training to get started. It's not, you know, like a 4-month course or a 4-year degree or something. So taking some of those simple tools, we want to build rapport with the people that we're talking to.
Yeah.
And you know, I've had so many conversations that started out with someone, you know, thinking that they weren't going to stick around for very long, or started out, like just a few examples that come to mind. There was a guy in Mississauga a couple of years back. I was talking to somebody else while he walked by, and he gave me 2 middle fingers, both hands, like a couple inches from my face, kind of waved them around.
Yeah.
And as he was walking away, I'm already in conversation. So I just turned to him and I just gave him a peace sign in return. Cause I didn't really have a chance to say much more.
Yeah.
He came back like 5 minutes later, kind of sheepishly.
Yeah.
And he's like, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
And we started talking about the abortion issue.
Yeah.
And, you know, I wasn't mirroring any of the hostility back.
Yeah.
And he came back, I guess, feeling comfortable and safe enough to ask me a question and get into a conversation about the issue.
Yeah.
Or just yesterday at the University of Toronto, handed a pamphlet to 3 students walking by. They looked at it, and the person who took it looked at it, came back to return it to me saying, oh, you know, we support a woman's right. And I said, okay, do you believe in human rights?
Yeah.
And she went to walk off, like, I don't want to talk about it. But her 2 friends didn't want to walk off.
Yeah.
So they stayed, and she came back. And I talked to them for like 40 minutes. Now, they didn't change their minds, but I think I challenged them in a few areas, and I gave them a bunch to think about.
Yeah.
But, you know, it was a challenging conversation for me as well. But we talked through the issue in detail. At one point in time, they were saying something about, you know, people who are against abortion, you know, do X, Y, and Z or whatever. And it was a very kind of caricature kind of negative stereotype.
Strong
like,
man.
Kind of lazy, don't really care about people after they're born, just want to pass laws and ban things, and it's not going to work and all, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
And I asked at one point, I said, like, you know, have I, like based on what? Like, have I said anything in the conversation to suggest that I believe that? Because so far we've been talking about a bunch of things, and we've both, like, we've all agreed about the need to do more to support people in these scenarios, or the need for better support systems, this kind of stuff. Like, I thought that was an area in which we agreed.
Yeah.
And she kind of thought about it for a second. And she's like, well, you know, I think it's the kind of stereotype for someone, you know, showing photos like you're showing. And I said, all right, I understand what you're saying. In conversation with me, do I match the stereotype that you had before? And they kind of thought about it for a second and like, okay, no, I guess not. Right. And just, there's this huge opportunity in dialogue, to build common ground and to make connections and to talk through the woundedness. Yeah. And, sometimes it's more challenging than others. Yeah. But, I think that, there's 2 more things I want to say. In terms of feeling the weight and standing up in defiance, I do think there's a question of stepping outside of our comfort zone to do it, right? Yeah. Like, if this is going on and we could do something that could change lives, you know, what are we willing to sacrifice? And I think some of our comfort should be some of that. And I've seen so many people who've said, like, I can never do what you do, who then give it a try and, you know, realize that actually, yes, they can, right? It might take a little bit of prep, might take a few hours of training, it might take, you know, being partnered with someone experienced to get started, but actually it's not as hard as it seems. Now, that doesn't mean it's for everyone. And I think that different people get support the mission in different ways. So some people are able to give their time and energy on the front lines and have these conversations. And I think more people can do it than think and give themselves credit for. Other people are like, you know what, I don't have the availability, or I have other important commitments and priorities to my family, or I don't think that I'm cut out for it, like, personally. And sometimes people are right, sometimes people are wrong. But, you know, they'll partner financially. They'll help to make the work possible by paying for the signs and paying for the staff and paying for the pamphlets 100%. And partner with the work that way. But the last thing that comes to mind is one of my friends. He did an internship with CCBR summer 2019, and then with me through the fall, summer 2018, and then with me in the fall through 2019, into winter 2020. And he had been involved volunteering with Toronto Against Abortion. And he was a good activist on the street. He didn't feel like a good activist himself. He didn't give himself enough credit. But I think, you know, he was sensitive enough that he just felt the brokenness, and he was good at reaching people, but it had a heavy toll on him.
Mm-hmm.
And he has stayed involved in other ways in recruiting other people to get involved as he's moved into a youth ministry role. But he recently invited a bunch of people he was working with through youth ministry to get involved. They came to a crash course he ran in Toronto and got involved doing activism. And he came and joined them on the streets, like he was with us in the streets. And, you know, he did that and encouraged them to join him because it's important to change hearts and minds on abortion and to save lives.
Yeah.
But also because some of what you were saying, like he said that, you know, even the ways in which he found it challenging to have conversations sometimes with high school students, with university students. He got involved as a university student himself. He said that he learned so much from the experience, and it really equipped him in a way to be able to have challenging conversations. And, you know, to start by finding common ground across difference, and to be able to talk through things with someone in a productive and effective way, even if emotions are high, even if it's a difficult, contentious subject. And the skills that he got from that, he was saying, had been so useful in other areas of his life that he wanted to invite people to get involved, both for the baby saving aspect, but also because it helps us to grow as human beings 100%. When we're learning how to minister to a wounded culture and, you know, talk through a difficult issue across a canyon of of different worldviews in a productive way that can close the gap and make progress and make positive impact, you know?
No, 100%. Yeah. And the funny thing too, is it's twofold. I mean, there's three benefits to having that conversation. One is you will hopefully and most likely make some progress in saving a child's life.
Yeah. Two,
you will benefit like just spiritually or as a person in these other ways. And it just in sort of a very practical way, you'll probably develop those skills and muscles better. Spiritually, you will be, you know, like saving lives. So there's that aspect of standing up for the dignity of man and standing up for, like, you know, basically Jesus, you know, his image is in each of us. So you're standing up for, you know, Christ himself. But the third too is that you're also, justice is important in one sense, and it's not, that's kind of a weird way to start this point, but it's important to let people know where they are going wrong, because if you don't, they will have to pay for those wrongdoings, even if they didn't know, not to the full degree that they would if they were knowledgeable of those crimes or those sins, you know. But sometimes I picture myself getting to like purgatory, and I'm with other people, and then they're like, and I'm like, oh, why are you guys here? And they're like, oh man, we did this, and I was like, oh yeah, I knew not to do that. And they were like, oh, like,
why didn't you tell me that?
Right? Yeah. And then we're both just there because I didn't say anything, you know. It's like I'm there because I didn't say anything, and they're there because they went ahead and did the thing. So there's really, sorry, I got kind of off on a tangent there, but there's threefold reasons the child's life, the other that you're speaking to, and your own are so entwined in that conversation, in that moment. And so it's like super important. And sorry, go ahead.
And it's a service to the other, to communicate the truth in love. So one of the things that we talk about in what we call hard apologetics in some of our training is there's two extremes to avoid. Like, one is using the truth like an axe to cut other people down. Right. And, you know, taking the time to go out and have these conversations in the street, like, it involves listening to people we're talking to. And listening means, okay, there are some ways in which we can say, okay, I think this is wrong. This is a false belief. This is wrong. This harms other people. And I want to challenge that. But also there's a lot when we listen that's actually common ground, or to gain more empathy for where people are coming from. The brokenness and the woundedness or the confusion that lead people to these conclusions can give us more empathy and more appreciation for how to challenge the false beliefs, where the true belief still exists, where the common ground is, and how to navigate that. But so it's not just using like the truth like an axe to cut people down. It's taking the time to listen. But the other extreme is being so concerned with simply being nice that you don't tell people the truth.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. And authentic love speaks truth.
Yeah.
Right. So we need to communicate the truth with love.
Mm-hmm.
But if we truly love our neighbor, if we truly love other people in our community
Mm-hmm.
who have such wrong beliefs about something so important as abortion,
Mm-hmm.
like this is life-changing and life-ending,
Mm-hmm.
right? Abortion kills children, and it is often traumatic for
Mm-hmm.
those involved in
Yes.
the death experience of the child.
Yeah.
So if we really love people who are that lost and wounded and broken on the subject of abortion, finding a way to reach them with the truth about abortion is an act of love.
Yeah.
So long as we're not we're devoid of love in the way that we do it.
Yeah.
And, we are all broken and wrong about certain things, right?
Yeah.
I hope that ways in which I am wrong and misguided in my life, somebody loves me enough to tell me that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to tell me that in a loving way, but
Yeah.
to communicate the truth if I've lost my way in some area, or
Yeah.
if I have some kind of wrong belief where I'm doing something that's bad and harmful. Like,
Yeah.
I would want someone to find a way to tell me and to challenge me and to try to get me back on track.
Yeah.
So we can develop empathy for others in seeing like, hey, look, I might be off in these other areas in life, and I could see how they could get to this conclusion based on what they've been through or what they've been taught or based on their upbringing,
Mm-hmm.
so that from a place of empathy and love, we can reach out and challenge them with the truth, because I think that's authentic love.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and that was the thing that I remember the moment. No, there was a bunch of moments, but again during the day. And yeah, I should also clarify that as well. I think everyone should try it. There's very few people who'd be like, yeah, it's not for you.
Yeah.
But and that was almost the ironic thing, where the people who looked, they were small in stature, like Katura. I only met her the one time, but we had some FaceTime training that I did before.
Yeah.
And she's a very small person, and not like tiny, but like she's, and meanwhile she's like a ball of fire and like resilience. And so it was funny that, and then I was probably bigger than most of the people we were speaking with, are like the same size. And I was like, this is so hard. So anyway, obviously that goes without saying that it's not like a physical thing, but like it's very spirit or like will or just mindset, I think.
Yeah.
So, which I'd love to touch on in a second. But one of the hardest things that threw me off my emotional stability in the day, because I started out okay. And I started out even strong, I could say. And I had a few conversations and they were good. And I got a few people running over, swearing or flipping me off or whatever. And then this old couple walked past, and the old lady was yelling at us and saying, like, I don't know, she was yelling something. She wouldn't come really that close. They were just walking by the street. And then I was like talking with someone else, and she was still going. And then they came back again like 2 minutes later, and they were like, we had to have, or like she was saying that like she had been through like an experience. And I was like, this is too, like, I can't, I don't know. I remember that moment where I was like, oh my gosh. And then people, because of that like energy coming at me, I was like, oh, I'm starting to lose my footholds here and my strength of like stability. And then after that, and then UFT, I found that way more difficult for some reason. People were like, that was a vicious, which is a weird thing, because it felt like it should be less progressive of a school,
right?
But it was more, there was more, I don't know, sort of behavior, like aggressive behavior around it, and I was like, oh, this is this, and I was just, I
think we had some counter protesters at U of T that day.
Yeah, I remember the one guy was like dancing around you.
Yeah.
I thought that was, but again, your ability to like that perfectly actually leads into this question. Your ability to, so you were speaking with a lady who had originally been talking with myself, and she was so passive that I didn't know where to begin. I was like trying to appeal emotionally, or just be like, look at the photos. What does that evoke? And like, this is why we're here. We're protecting life. And she was like, this is like an abuse. So there's like visual abuse and all this stuff. oh man. And so then I was like, well, you know what? Why don't you go talk to this guy? I pushed her, I ushered her over to you.
Yeah.
And then while you were speaking with her, this other guy came out he had like I think he had like a cape on or something, or there was something funny about, he was wearing like an out of, the ordinary piece of clothing.
Right.
and he was like, he had like dye on his like fingernails or like whatever that is.
Yeah.
Nail polish. And then he was jumping around with a song, and the song was like so inappropriate. I remember that.
Yeah.
But your ability, Blaise, to still have that conversation with that girl it was the two opposite ends of the spectrum. One guy was jumping around in front of the sign you were holding.
Yeah.
As you were switching it around to try and show more people, he would jump around with the speaker while maintaining probably the most calm conversation I've ever seen someone have. Where does that mindset come from? What is that? Have you always had that? Do you practice that? How do you stay resilient emotionally, spiritually? You know what I mean? What is that? It was almost a superpower. Not saying that it wasn't, because I know that you're an ordinary guy doing extraordinary things, but where does that come from, I guess?
Right. Two things that come to mind are experience and perspective. So, with counter-protests specifically,
Mm-hmm.
When the U of T Students for Life activism team grew into Toronto Against Abortion, we started doing activism at Ryerson University, as it then was.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a very vocal, more than vocal, counter-protest group, the Ryerson Reproductive Justice Collective.
Wow.
My meeting before we were chatting today was with a lawyer for ongoing litigation from assaults that happened in 2018 at Ryerson.
Holy smokes.
And there were thefts and assaults and all sorts of police reports. And now since we handled that, and there were some serious consequences, like the person who assaulted me and a colleague, she was arrested, charged with assault with a weapon. She pled guilty to assault. She was suspended for a year at Ryerson. We haven't had any incidents from the counter-protest group since,
Mm-hmm.
So we have extra training to deal with that, and we come down hard when we can't de-escalate so that people face consequences for breaking the law. But we dealt with things up to that level, and counter-protesters who weren't breaking the law were constantly trying to block the signs
Mm-hmm.
or interfere with conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And tactically, between 2016 and 2018 or 2019, I just gained a lot of experience dealing with the tactical obstacle
Mm-hmm.
of counter-protesters who are trying to interfere with our objective, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they block the signs, you move it around, you hold a few more signs. Or you pick where they stand. Are you going to block my sign? Okay, you can stand over here to the left. I'll put my sign there, and then I'm going to talk to people over the right.
Yeah.
Or you're going to block the signs. Okay, we'll let you guys block the signs, attract more attention here, and we'll have other people in the team float around with pamphlets to have conversation as people are looking and being like, what's going on, right?
Yeah.
So the kind of tactics and strategy that went into dealing with that became very routine for those of us who experienced heavy counter-protest there. We're like, all right, we know the drill. It's just kind of automatic, tactically, strategically.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. Perhaps I just flipped into counter-protest mode because I've dealt with it so many times.
Yeah.
But then the second thing is the perspective that that people are often coming from a place of woundedness,
Mm-hmm.
and anger is often a mask for pain.
Mm-hmm.
And it's often people with personal experience with abortion, or maybe indirect, like someone they know or love who's had an abortion, or people who've gone through a lot of other difficult and awful experiences,
Mm-hmm.
like people who are survivors of sexual assault, or who have dealt with gender identity confusion.
Mm-hmm.
And there's often a lot of that woundedness. Like you're going to have a lot more of that on average with
Mm-hmm.
people who are out there counter-protesting.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of perspective gives me empathy.
Mm-hmm.
And the hard apologetics, like we could do a whole hour-long training on hard apologetics, but we try to do three things. Take the time to listen, seeking to understand. communicate the truth in love and inspire people to see hard circumstances in a difficult way, in a different way. And there are lots of practical tools we use to do that. But it's about shifting the perspective from seeing somebody like the dude with nail polish blasting inappropriate songs, dancing around. He's a regular with the U of T counter protest. Instead of having this instinctive response of like, "Hey, what's wrong with you?"
Mm-hmm.
Shifting our perspective to be like, "Hey, what happened to someone that they would be in such a place to conduct themselves like that in life?" And hard apologetics is about like, okay, what is this person trying to say that they aren't putting into words?
Mm-hmm.
Apologetics is about what someone believes, right? Like, do you believe in human rights? Like, when does life begin? Hard apologetics is about why someone believes what they believe, where that passion comes from when they became pro-choice. So I remember some of that day at U of T, and I think I can picture the face of the person I was talking to, and I definitely know the guy who was blasting the music.
So you know him, he's around.
Yeah, I've encountered him a bunch of times. You know, the guy who was blasting music, dancing around, blocking signs, I've tried. He has not been open to conversation.
Yeah.
So I'm in tactical mode. All right.
Yeah.
He's trying to interfere with our ability to talk to people.
Mm-hmm.
How do I route around the obstacle? How do I make it difficult for him to block what we're trying to do? I'm in tactical mode. The other counter protester, she seemed willing to talk.
Yeah.
So I'm in hard apologetics mode with her. I'm like, all right, how can I build common ground, build a bridge? How can I get to know her? How can I get to know where she's coming from?
Mm-hmm.
And the more I can do that, the more I have the ability to communicate the apologetics in a way that she'd actually listen to me, right? Like, people don't care what you know until they know that you care. And if I can make some kind of personal connection and take the time to truly listen to her, like not just hear her as an argument or not just see her as an obstacle, but try and understand where she as an individual human being is coming from and what connects her to the issue and where's her passion and motivation, and you know, humanize myself by just finding areas where we agree, and then communicate the apologetics in a way that it might actually be received, that she might actually listen to what I have to say at least somewhat. So, you know, tactically, counter-protest, strategic obstacles, but then perspective, hard apologetics, and anger as a mask for pain, and just seeing the woundedness and brokenness. And that's a big part of talking to people about abortion too.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, it was very well done. And I'm not around those environments ever, which I'm going to call myself out on a couple of things. One is that I was, that was a hard day, but also I did it, which was good. And I don't think I'm a coward, but I was very afraid to do that. And I haven't done it since.
Yeah.
But I have done other lesser outreach or I don't know what the words are, activism.
Yeah.
But I should honestly reconsider getting involved in that, or think about my role in that more.
Yeah. What I would encourage you to do, and someone who's feeling that way about outreach, you know, I do think there is a discernment question, right? Like, is my role in this on the front lines or not? But it does involve, for everyone, stepping outside your comfort zone and learning how to do a few things. What I would encourage is maybe considering giving a program a shot as a discernment opportunity, right? True. So like, we run a mission trip to Florida for a week in February every year, and it's 4 days of conversation on Florida university campuses. Great weather in the winter. And there's more of an openness to dialogue on abortion in America than there is in the States. So it's just like a great place to have conversations. Or every July, we run a 3-day Toronto crash course where you go to the streets for a couple afternoons, but there's a lot more training in the classroom in apologetics and strategy. You know, so something like one of these 3 or 4 day boot camps, or the Florida Abortion Awareness Project, or the Toronto Prolife crash course, where you could get a few days to have a bunch of conversations, get some more training and grounding. And I think that would be a more fair discernment opportunity, you know? And if after doing something like that, you're like, you know what, I appreciate this, but I just don't think I'm cut out for it, you know, That is true of some people.
Yeah.
But for a lot of people, it takes something to get over that hurdle and be like, you know what? Actually, I can do this.
Yeah.
I just needed some perspective on this, or I needed some more tools that were beyond the initial 2-hour training, or I needed to be able to like have 10, 15 conversations in a row and just figure out what works and what doesn't, right?
And see conversion.
Yeah.
That's a massive part of there were times where I was like, I can't do this. And then I would look over and see you or Katura or whoever else, and someone would be like really moved by the conversation and like sign up for, and I'm like, okay, never mind. I'm back again, you know?
Right.
So, but then the waves of, like, almost the analogy of the ocean, the waves that were beating on me.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I'm not, I wanted to do it, and I'm glad I did. And I want to get involved further, and discernment, like you're saying, is so important.
Yeah. Like a multi-day program like that would be a really good opportunity just to get more grounded and have more experience, to see more than a couple hours. What it plays out like and how it can work or not for you.
Yeah. And I think too, the street, now I may just be saying this because I'm sitting here in a safe house right now, but the street to me seems more approachable than the university campus. There was a passiveness on campuses, and I went to a public university. I went to before that I went to a private small Catholic university, but I didn't really ever engage in that type of life. But there's something that makes it the best place to do that type of activism, but also the place that is hardest to do that activism. And that is that there's something up with university campuses and how spiritually they are so ajar, or I don't know what the word is, just I don't know. So
there's a lot of deprogramming that needs to be done talking to university students,
and they're protected. People on the street, you're your own person. You don't have any protection from a bigger thing, really, besides like government. But in a university, you're kind of shielded by the university ethics and morals, and you believe in the teachers, like, for some reason, that they're right, and I have the backing of an institution, and so we were a certain
amount of groupthink that takes place.
It was a really big tribe. And I felt we went into the heart of the lion's den, and I was like,
well, in a sense, ideologically, I think Toronto university campuses are the heart of the lion's den. From having done a lot of activism across Canada and a bit in the United States, I think that Toronto campuses are some of the most difficult ideologically, like that, in terms of having that divide. The downside to conversations in a city in general, which we do all the time, is that you end up having a lot of shorter conversations. Sometimes you can talk to someone for a long time, but it's very normal on a university campus to talk to someone for half an hour or an hour and really get to go into it in depth, even if there can be a lot of challenges to try and work through in the conversation. Whereas when you're talking to someone, just generally downtown Toronto or downtown Montreal or something, you might only get 2 or 3 minutes with them. And it's a lot less common that someone will try to hand a pamphlet back, but still stay and talk to you for 40 minutes, like happened to me, right? That's one of the things that's really nice about the Florida Abortion Awareness Project is you get the depth of university campuses without the same level of ideological capture when you're in the States. I mean, there's still issues with universities in the States and the culture there, but there's more of an openness to the abortion debate. Whereas on Canadian campuses, we have to unsettle an issue that has been settled in people's minds. In the States, it's at least an unsettled issue already. It's an open conversation debate. We're not the ones cracking it open for the first time. Also, one of the best places to do outreach in Canada on college campuses. Because you have, like we do outreach in front of high schools, on universities, on college campuses. On high schools, you don't have the same level of deep programming, that's changing, but you don't have a level of maturity on average. Universities, you have a level of maturity, but you got all this kind of ideological deprogramming. college campuses, you get the maturity without the same kind of
Fascinating.
ideological capture.
Yeah.
Wonderful place to have conversations.
Yeah.
The other thing that some of the activism teams in Western Canada do more often is use the door knocking project to get comfortable with apologetics.
Yeah.
Because you go door to door, there's a bit of a selection bias. The people who are really hostile or don't want to talk to you, they're just not going to talk to you.
Yeah.
And you end up talking with people who are open to conversation, and you're not unsettling the issue for an entire community, which is important and necessary, like with the street outreach and making the photos visible to a whole community at scale. But while you're just going one house at a time, one conversation at a time, you get these high quality conversations where you can get comfortable having conversations and comfortable with the apologetics. So then when you step into the street outreach context, you've already got more comfort with the apologetics. You've already got, you get a few dozen conversations under your belt at least. And then you can deal with the added complexities of being out on the street on the university campus or something.
Yeah. And it was, that makes a lot of sense. I think door to door and street activism are something that I'm going to look into a bit more because, like I say, it took a couple of emotions. I sound like a real, I don't know what the word is, but I'm a soft human being when I say this, but like the
sounds like you have a big heart.
The 4 days following our outreach, I was like, oh my gosh. I remember I had to go for this like long kayak and like process what I was feeling. And I was like, I know in my heart what is right, but how aggressively those people were. And again, I don't want to paint a picture for the listeners who maybe haven't done this, but you can do it. Like someone can do it, and it just depends on, where or what time or whatever. But I would recommend probably the door knocking probably first. Is like what you're saying. That I think is better.
Yeah. So for Toronto Against Abortion, we don't do a ton of door knocking, and we get people involved directly in the choice chain. We'll pair them with someone experienced and things like that. But many other groups do a lot more door knocking. That can be one way to ease into activism. And, I think the heaviness that you were feeling, and why I say like big heart, like I think that, zooming out on the day, there were a few people that yelled. I would say like 98% of the people who walked by didn't not care, right? Yeah. And the challenge was getting them to stop in conversation. There were no police reports filed that day or anything like that, right? But what you were feeling is when we unsettle the issue and talk to people about abortion, you can feel and see the brokenness, right? I think of a participant in one of our boot camps. It was in George Brown College. We were doing outreach, and it was maybe her first or second time, and I was paired up with her. And she said to me at one point, she's just like, you can just like see the brokenness in people. Like you could see it on their faces, even just in like the sort of callous things that are said, or the strong affirmation of killing an innocent human being, or just like you can feel the weight when you care about other people and have empathy for them. You can feel the pain and the woundedness, So I think that was the heaviness from the day.
You're right. Like there was no, you're absolutely right again. And I want to separate the reality of what went down versus like how I experienced a particular emotion coming away from the day. But there was no one really yelled, and there was no aggression at all, except one guy playing music on a speaker. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but the energy was crazy, and that was something that I'm susceptible to energy levels a lot.
Yeah.
And I remember the energy just being like, whoa, this is insane. And so anyway, but
it's the sort of negative piece in Why We Can't Wait by Martin Luther King Jr., but his letter from a Birmingham jail more specifically.
Wow.
He says, "We who engage in non-violent direct action are not the creators of tension. We merely bring to the surface the hidden tension that is already alive. We bring it out into the open so that it can be seen and dealt with, like a boil that can never be cured so long as it is covered up, but must be opened with all of its ugliness to the natural medicines of air and light. Injustice must be exposed with all the tension its exposure creates. to the light of human conscience and the air of national opinion. So that's my favorite quote from.
Yeah, did you memorize?
Yeah,
oh my!
It's my favorite quote, and we use it in a bunch of our presentations. But he was there, sitting in jail, in the middle of the direct action that they engaged in Birmingham, Alabama. They went to the belly of the beast, to one of the most segregated cities in the Republic, and I think it was 1963. Right, so you don't go to places where people are happy to receive you. Like they went to the heart of the injustice in the South. And they engaged in direct action. They went out and did things that they knew they were going to be arrested for. They went out and broke laws that they believed to be unjust, and so that they would be willing to suffer the consequences so that people could see the injustice of the laws and so that they could change them. And it was from that jail cell in Birmingham that on scraps of paper, he wrote this letter, unsure at that status of the bail money and the future of the movement at the time, because they were at this kind of critical juncture. But it's both the importance of the nonviolent direct action to expose injustice, but the thing more specifically that reminded me of it with what you were saying was sort of negative piece, the negative tension, right? Because you can walk around that campus, you're not going to necessarily feel that energy, but once you unsettle the abortion issue and bring an issue like that out to the surface, that tension's already there. That pain and woundedness is already there, but now you can see it because we've brought it to the surface, right? But it's there. It's under, like, people are walking around with these abortion experiences, with the woundedness from the sexual revolution. And that is already a part of their everyday life. And it comes back to that, like, what's authentic love, right? If we know that level of pain and woundedness is the average on a university campus in a Canadian city, what a mission field to bring the truth to. But it brings that negative tension out to the surface when you do it, right? It's already there. But how else can you deal with it?
No, 100%. And that was the thing. I had gotten there half an hour, maybe 40 minutes early, and I was just walking around trying to prep, like, do some prepping. And I was praying and I was thinking and I was kind of going over some of my thoughts and all these different things. And I was like, this is, and I don't like university campuses anyway, but I was walking around thinking, like, this place has like a spirit of a real, I don't know, it should be one thing and it's not. And even just walking around, I was like, and then, the worst part too is these kids are like 17, 18, 19 years old, and that's so young. And I was walking around kind of just looking at some of them, and it was, everyone was kind of doing. And I was like, you guys you've been stolen from and lied to, and we're about to blow the cover off this thing. And I said, you guys showed up with the dolly of like signs, and I was like, oh, here we go. And things kicked off, and you know what? It was an amazing day that I'm really happy I did. But
it brings that weight to the surface, right?
So where you kind of touched on that a little bit, the sexual revolution, and also, Blaise, I don't want to hold you up. I'm like super down to just keep talking for like hours and stuff like that, but I don't want.
I'm good to talk for a bit longer still.
Sweet, man. I'm gonna check my. We're good. No, where does this come from? What's the history of this? Like, in my mind, it's very fascinating to me to, like, the dehumanization of any group is fascinating in a horrible way. I don't want to sound melodramatic saying that. It's the same argument for abortion is the same argument for slavery, which was if it's on my property, and if it's on my property, then it belongs to me. And that was the argument for slavery. And now if it's in my body, it's my part of my body, and I can do what I want.
And it's the notion that some human beings are not persons deserving of rights and respect.
Which is a weird that approach to life is a real self-reflection of how you think of yourself. Because if you think of yourself as, if you think of yourself as not your own, in a sense, like, I can't make my hand grow any bigger, or I can't, I really only have dominion over my body. Like I don't own it in a sense.
Right.
And I'm also part of a lot of bigger things. But when people say, what am I now? I'm getting away from the topic. But when people say like, this is my, this is who I am, this is my stuff, these are my rights and everything. And they put varying degrees of importance on people, and they like subhuman, human, and like maybe superhuman type of things. It's a very weird reflection of self in that sense as well. Anyway, that's kind of a side point. It is relevant, I guess, a little bit. But where does this topic come from? Why is abortion around, do you think? Like, where does it come from? What's fueling it? What's going on? Like, why do we have this problem in the West?
Right.
And what's a bigger thing? I don't know. That's a massive question. But if you have thoughts or if any reflections on that?
Yeah,
really,
a brief answer to a massive question.
Yeah.
So my colleague, Jonathan Van Maren, our communications director at the Canadian Centre for Bioethical Reform, he studied history. I studied, among other things, philosophy and theology. He says I take an intellectual approach. He takes a historian approach. Yeah. And I'll give you both answers quickly. I think I'll start with the history, because he's got a new book coming out this fall, How We Got Here, A Guide to an Anti-Christian Age.
Wow. And
it's an updated version of, so I haven't read the new book yet, but it's an update on his 2016 book, The Culture War, which seek to answer the same questions. Just a lot of things have happened in the last 8 years, so he's got a new edition coming out. And he traces the history from the sexual revolution on up to present day in terms of the lies told and that our culture believed in the sexual revolution, and the implications for abortion and pornography and marriage, and just the breakdown of the family and our understanding of our human sexuality, that has led to the commodification of preborn children, where unwanted children are discarded, and even through in vitro fertilization, that we will objectify children and kill to create children. Right? There's a lot of death involved in creating life through in vitro fertilization, and just kind of how we got there through, how we got here from the sexual revolution on up to present day. So, highly recommend keeping an eye out for his book. And if you're looking for other podcast guests, he'd be a fascinating person to talk to with, like we do the same work, but he's coming from a communications perspective, a history perspective. He's writing on the broader culture war on his website, thebridgehead.ca. And that could be a fascinating conversation too. Yeah. But that's a resource we're producing to kind of answer the question. And I think intellectually, philosophically, theologically, like going into the sexual revolution, to me is super brief with a few centuries of philosophy and theology. I think you go from the Enlightenment, where we have this break from body and soul, this sort of, I think, therefore I am, separation, that our body is something that we have, not a part of who we are, right? And that pervades the West. And if your body is something you own, something you have, a mechanism, as opposed to being an organism where we're both body and soul. I mean, we've lost sight of the soul in terms of losing religion in the West, and we've lost sight of the body as an integral part of who we are, as opposed to an object that we possess. And then, you want to do something, or your body's inconvenient or doesn't fit with your desires. So then fix it. Like, there's somebody else whose body's in the way, like a preborn child. Well, you can get rid of them. Rather than seeing our sexuality and our fertility as an essential part of our identity and a part of who we are and what it means to be human and how we're meant to live and flourish in relationship with each other, we come to see our body as obstacles for fulfilling desires and objects that we can customize or manipulate and change if they don't fit the thing that we're trying to do. And that break in our understanding of our body is a break in understanding of our humanity. I think that's led to the sexual revolution. And then, for me personally, as a Catholic, and CCBR and Toronto Right to Life are non-sectarian organizations, work with people of any faith or no faith at all. But I come at this from a Catholic individually. I see the pro-life work as an emergency response, the role of a paramedic, right? Like somebody's having a heart attack, you don't send them to a nutritionist. You send the paramedics in, they go to the ER. You need that emergency response for the crisis. And that's what anti-abortion activism is doing. It's responding to the emergency as first responders, the paramedic response. But, after you get through the ER, if you can survive the heart attack, it might be a good idea to see that nutritionist or to go visit your family doctor. Be like, was there problems in my health or exercise or some kind of undiagnosed heart condition that has made me more prone to heart attacks? Can I do things for my overall health and wellness to prevent another emergency? And on that health and wellness prevention, for me as a Catholic, I've been really influenced by St. John Paul II's theology of the body.
Totally,
That was a huge focus of my study of theology in my master's and some courses that side of it. And just last night I was leading an online theology of the body crash course study. Like that's something I do on the side from my pro-life work in trying to bring people into the theology of the body, because I think that the Christian biblical sexual ethic, and I think you see the richness of that in the Catholic understanding of the human being and human sexuality, is an antidote to the lies about what it means to be human in the sexual revolution. With anti-abortion work, we don't, we're focused on the frontline emergency response. So, how can we change someone's mind on the abortion issue using science and human rights, deal with the narrow problem with the emergency? But personally, the root cause, the fork in the road, is way back in just the understanding of what it means to be human, especially in light of our sexuality. And our culture has lost that, and it's led to the sexual revolution. It's led to all of these, to the culture of death, to all of this objectification and harm and fracture of relationship.
There's something, well, first off, spot on. I have a little bit of theology, a little bit of philosophy, a little bit of understanding of these things, and that was enlightening and awesome. The sort of connections to that. There's something fascinating to me about when you sever mind and body, but you can't, because that's the reality. But you try. As a human, you try. And that's the original sort of sin. The consequences of original sin was that God didn't do anything to us. He just let us live still, which was an act of grace in itself. He let us live, but we had to live with the consequence of disobeying. And so now our our body disobeys our will, our soul. And so we've always had this sort of split, and St. Paul even says that, my flesh, there's a war, an internal war going on with my flesh and spirit.
Right.
And this very fascinating thing. And that's really where salvation comes from, is that you face the cross. You face the thing that is hurting you and suffering, making you suffer. And if you face that and take that, that will bring you towards Christ. But that's, again, tangent. I'm a bit of a tangent. but there's something fascinating you were saying about what I'm trying to get at is, what are the things that unite soul and body? Because you've already brought one up in my mind that I'm thinking of, and that is the human face. And it's something that I know psychologically that you could do to people to dehumanize, either as to become an authority, or to dehumanize and make them unhuman, so that you feel less empathy when applying harm to these people. You remove their face. And so during COVID, there was the mask mandate, which I'm pretty sure there was very little evidence that a mask actually prevented the particle of anything. But anyway, that's a separate topic of what's going on there. But the very fact that there have been proven psychological studies that removing the face removes the humanity of people. So just as one example where you could bring body and soul back together again, being the face of a human, what are the other examples of that? What are those types of things that people could do, just listening, even myself, what are things that you could do to reinstill humanity in an other by your very encounter with you're in a grocery store, or what's that kind of thing? You have any thoughts on that? Like, that's kind of a deep.
Yeah. No, I do. Yeah, man. Oh, we're getting really deep now.
But I don't know. That amazes me. There's stuff you can do like that.
For sure. A few asides, first of all. Like straying from the pro-life stuff, which I'm totally into to go in this direction, but just before departing from it,
we'll get back.
I think we can change hearts and minds on abortion with people of any faith or no faith at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that through science and human rights, we can show people that killing a baby is wrong and that we shouldn't act this way towards innocent human beings. I think that the secular apologetics can answer the abortion question.
Yeah.
However, to get to the deep answer about the problem from the sexual revolution, I think you need to go deeper. I think there are other secular apologetics. You can narrow out one issue or the other or something, but that's where to get to the deep answers of how we got here that I think the Christian lens provides answers that a merely secular approach doesn't. On the face, without taking the COVID tangent, I was wearing an N95 a respirator and I was a fan of masks and stuff, but they have the downside of losing that face-to-face connection. I think, when you think in a broken sexual ethics context, I think of something like some incredibly dehumanizing examples, like the notion of a glory hole, to enable genital contact and intercourse. We're not without seeing the body, never mind face of another human being, or even with pornography. Like pornography, in one sense, the problem with pornography isn't that it shows too much, but too little. In other words, it's not about the face and truly seeing the other person. It's about reducing the person to a set of body parts and objects, right? Whereas that face-to-face connection, like, the eyes is the window to the soul, or in the Faces of Abortion tour, when we were saying the face makes visible the person, I was channeling John Paul II's theology of the body. The thesis statement of that is the body, in fact, and only the body, is capable of making visible the invisible, the spiritual and the divine. It's been created to transfer into visible reality the mystery hidden in God from eternity, and thus to be a sign of it. That's the thesis statement of the theology of the body. The body makes visible the person, right? It's through the body, and the face, I think, has a special role there, that we truly encounter, and you use the word encounter, we truly encounter another human being. From the Faces of Abortion tour is also channeling philosopher Emmanuel Levinas. He says that the face speaks. The face sort of unsettles us and invites us out of a focus on the self and into a relationship of responsibility with the other. It's like coming face to face with another person. It's like, here is someone else, not something else, but someone else. And it's the very start of morality, the very start of relationships. And with all of that to say, your question is, what else besides this? I think Father Luigi Giussani, the founder of the Communion and Liberation movement, not to be mistaken with liberation theology, he was really focused on the method of encounter, that it's that person-to-person encounter that we ultimately encounter Christ, or that we come to learn or know anything, but it's just central to the human experience. And I think it's about an encounter with relationship, an encounter of love. Like, I've journeyed with friends who have been through difficult things. One of my friends was somebody who became my friend. She was sexually assaulted and had a pornography addiction, and through 8 years of abusive relationships had been through hell. And a big part of healing in her experience, I think, was coming face to face with people in her life, having people in her life who truly loved her
Mm-hmm.
and didn't want to use her. And especially because it was a sexual brokenness
Yeah.
and sexual wounds,
Mm-hmm.
coming face to face with men in her life
Yeah.
who truly loved her and didn't see her as an object and didn't
Yeah.
want to use her.
Yeah.
The man who became her husband now, they're married with a kid.
Right.
I think in my friendship with her and in encountering other people, realizing that, like, okay, I'm not an object for everyone. This isn't how things are. This isn't how things have to be.
Yeah.
That it is possible for someone, and especially for a man across the sexual divide, to truly love me and want what is good and best for me, and not just want to use me as an object. Right? And it was through the encounter with another person and the experience of authentic love and care that I think she was able to see some of the lies and move forward in healing from trauma and brokenness.
Yeah.
So it's like that experience of being truly loved, having truly someone willing your good and not just wanting you for something else.
Yeah.
That is really like face to face is the start of the encounter to see the other person, but then can the other person actually respond with love? Can you have a relationship like that to be a counter argument to the lies and the experience of harmful and broken relationships that you've had, and a sign and a witness to the truth that we're made for more than that?
Yeah. I think that's a brilliant answer that I was asking for. Well, I was looking for the root, but I was following a branch, which is what are some practices, but you were saying no, any encounter can be an encounter that heals and an encounter that points to the unity of soul and body and the significance of soul and body and the significance of an individual, a human being who has dignity, a divine dignity. And so, and then so in that, even like any interaction done with love will convey those things rather than like, and the face is so significant because it can convey the most emotion in a human body, or a human being.
Yeah.
You know, it's such an emotional landscape, I guess.
Yeah.
And but anything done, even if you did something, a random act of kindness, they would still feel that unity of body and soul as well as the other things, just instinctually, because that's the reality of this.
Yeah.
That's amazing, man. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's, the Christian response to what it means to be a human being most fundamentally, especially before the problem of sin, right? Like how we are created before sin and brokenness enter the picture, is that we're creating the image and likeness of God. That establishes the individual dignity of the person. But the Christian understanding is that we're creating the image and likeness of a Trinitarian God, a God who is relationship. Yeah. So it's both the individual dignity and person and humanity, but that we're not isolated, that we're made for relationships and for relationships of life-giving, self-giving love. Yeah. And if people haven't experienced that, but they've experienced, twisted or versions of that, or the opposite version of that, right? Of grasping and taking and selfish, right? Like the motto of the pro-choice movement, to link it back into an abortion for a second, is my body, my choice. Whereas Christ says, this is my body given up for you, right? In the Christian understanding, the deepest understanding of what it means to be human and what we're called to imitate is the sacrificial love expressed through the body. Whereas abortion is child sacrifice expressed through the body. It's sacrificing someone else for you, as opposed to sacrificing yourself for someone else. So when we've experienced the opposite, these twisted lies, I think that what is fundamentally most needed to address the brokenness from a perspective, again, bringing my personal faith into this beyond just the pro-life movement, is the experience of authentic love, which is sacrificial love, which is self-giving, life-giving love, and that kind of encounter with another person, showing that a different kind of relationship is possible, and our hearts hunger for that.
Yeah.
Right? When we experience that, everybody wants that.
Yeah.
Right? Nobody wants to be used.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to be loved. It's just a question of if you think it's actually possible.
Yeah. Wow, man. That's amazing. That's blowing my mind away, that you're absolutely right. Like, I mean, and again, it probably transcends the pro-life issue into other, pretty much any form of sin, is that it's selfish, which of course I know that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you know, when you know something, when you come at it from a different, and then you're absolutely right. The antidote to that is that Christ, who became like sin, offers himself up, like offers up his own body for it. That's amazing, man. That's unbelievable. So the antidote is that we have this example of how to break free from that, which is wow. That's amazing.
And to put a point on it with a quote, if there's one JP2 drinking game, it would be when he quotes Gaudium et Spes 24, the 24th paragraph from Pastoral Constitution on the Church in the Modern World, Joy and Hope, one of the documents from the Second Vatican Council. It's his favorite, one of his favorite things to quote. And then in Gaudium et Spes, paragraph 24 says, "Man cannot find himself except through a sincere gift of self." And he keeps coming back to that because it's so key to understand who we are as human beings as an antidote to the lies and the brokenness. It's through that sincere gift of self. And the other one in Gaudium et Spes 22 is that Christ fully reveals to himself and makes his supreme calling clear, right? And that's through the ultimate model of the sincere gift of self, of sacrificial love, right? So it's through that sincere gift, it's an experience of a sincere gift of self that has to be the antidote to the brokenness of sin. Brokenness in our current cultural context of sin today, but the brokenness of sin more generally, I think the Catholic Church believes.
100%. Yeah. And the important point there too, again, that you've already touched base on, but just to circle back to it, is that we are a being of relation. And that's our identity that is born and derived from the identity of God, who is like
a communion of persons in self-giving, a relation of self-giving love, right? And an eternal exchange of love is the catechism line.
And it only makes sense like that you have an all-powerful being in a trinity like that. Anyway, we won't get into theology, but dang, man, this is great stuff. So I just want to make sure I don't miss anything. Okay, I'm just going over there's so much stuff, random stuff that I want to touch base on, about. I guess there's another thing, what do you think the motivation for people being passive? Where does it, maybe you just touch briefly. I mean, we don't
You mean for pro-lifers being passive?
No,
pro-choicers being passive?
More culture in general. I guess we've kind of touched base on that. It's a wound that people don't want to address. And but do you think there's more there, passiveness of culture to this type of topic? I don't know, it seems very strange to me that it's, in the one sense, probably the most pressing thing of our time, certainly is the most pressing thing of our time, and as well, potentially ever, really. I mean, this is a massive genocide that we're talking about.
Millions and millions of human beings killed. Abortion is the leading cause of death in Canada. Like preborn children are killed at a rate through abortion and I guess IVF that are just at a rate that's astronomically higher than any other cause of death for any other human being. I think that I come back to the negative piece and your experience in the day with Toronto against abortion. I don't think that people are necessarily passive when confronted with the faces of the victims,
right.
when face to face with the issue of abortion and the human beings being killed. I think that a lot of it is out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah.
Right. Like this is a settled issue. This is part of a modern society. To paraphrase G.K. Chesterton, it's not that they've heard the pro-life position and rejected it. It's that they've never truly heard the pro-life position. But there's that negative piece there, right? It's not that people have come to some confident resolution. Some people have or feel that way, but I think the vast majority of people in Canada and the United States, in terms of places I've done pro-life activism, the vast majority of people, it's more of a negative piece.
Yeah.
And when we unsettle the issue, when we bring the issue to the forefront, it's less of a passive, whatever kind of reaction. You get that from some people, and I think that can also come from a calloused place of brokenness and woundedness too.
100%.
But most often, the out of sight, out of mind goes away, and then we actually have to address the weight of the issue and the brokenness there.
That's true. Yeah. No, I was just thinking like, I just jotted down why passive. But it is fascinating to me that there's a passiveness to, and I guess would you say that that's the same in groups that profess like anti-abortion use as well? Like you mentioned, like when you were trying to clarify my question, like pro-lifers, quote unquote, religious life, like the Catholic Church is dead set, like doctrine that this is a no, like you get excommunicated, which just reveals that if you did think this was cool, then you were never even a part of the community anyway. So
it's excommunication because it is something that separates you from God, from God and the church in such a significant way that the excommunication is just recognizing the reality of how much you have separated yourself through that kind of action. I think that the passivity among Christians, and I do a lot of work with Catholics and Protestants, inviting people into the movement to get involved. There are some different issues with activating different denominations, but I think that first of all, you have some section of Christians that are more influenced by the culture than their faith, so they might actually be pro-choice in some ways or support abortion. So, just because someone is identifies as a Christian or is active does not necessarily mean that they believe or understand everything their faith teaches. So there's that category. But then I think there's also the people who are genuinely pro-life, but it's out of sight, out of mind in a different way, right? In terms of not the issue not being a priority. And I think coming face to face with the victims can help, as we discussed earlier, to make that a priority in your life and to realize, okay, hold on a second, this isn't some other issue on the list, right? These are 300 unique, unrepeatable individual human beings being killed every day. And like that changes how you see society when you recognize that's going on. I think the other kind of passivity, another concept we brought in the Face of Abortion tour, is the difference between the suite level and the street level. So at the suite level, certainly in Canada, the politicians, government, the media, the institutions are saying this debate's closed, right? Like so much of the Canadian political conversation is, are they going to reopen the abortion debate? The debate's closed, right? On the street level, the debate's wide open, right? Like the debate happens when we bring the faces of the victims to the people. When we bring the pro-life message straight to the people, the debate's wide open, right? But the powers that be consider it a closed and settled issue. So there's a certain passivity that comes from this societal view that it's settled. In practice, it's not. It's a negative piece. It doesn't take much to unsettle it. So a lot of what we do is it's a street level defiance that defines the movement to end the killing. We are bringing the message straight to the people, regardless of what the gatekeepers say. The debate's closed. It's like, well, actually, we just started it without you, right? Like it's happening over here. You can come join us or not. But some of that passivity comes from the gatekeepers trying to keep the debate closed when wide open if you actually go to have a conversation with people.
Yeah, which is kind of weird, and not weird. I mean, I know this, again, history in this way repeats itself, but the conversation has not been closed because any person, any guy and girl faced with this decision, it's an open conversation.
Yeah.
You literally probably have 10 to 15 conversations about the topic. No one, like, I pray no one just passively goes. And if they do, again, it's not passive in regards of like, well, whatever. You know, it would be a decision and there would be some emotional consequence to go and do this. So the conversation cannot be closed in its own way. And again, it's interesting to me that it targets women, and the pro-choice movement sort of says, oh, you guys target women. And it's like, well, no, we don't. Like, we're trying to protect women. And there's the male DNA in there as well. Like, this isn't just, I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, it's very much.
I think pregnancy is it's obviously a special burden on women, but it isn't on men.
Yeah.
But it is very much an everyone issue because, first of all, it's a human rights issue.
Yeah.
And it takes two people to make a child.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's not simply saying like, guys should have some right, though I think that men should be part of the conversation. But I think more fundamentally, if fathers would stand up and support women and children in these difficult pregnancies, the abortion rate would be halved overnight. Yeah. Right? It's that it takes two to make a child, but it takes two to solve the problem. Yeah. Right? Yeah, that it's a problem of how men are responding as well. If men are like, in my undergrad with U of T Students for Life, I was a technology officer, and I spent a bunch of time blogging in the late 2000s for the U of T Students for Life blog. And one of the articles that got the most traction, because it was one of the most horrific things I read, I was responding to this article on AskMen.com, how to convince your girlfriend to have an abortion. Wow. And it was basically saying, like, you got that Harley, like, you want to lose the Harley, you want to give up all your hopes and dreams. Like, no, if you don't, here's how you can pressure her into having an abortion. Jeez. Right? It was horrific. Yeah. Right. And, if men are doing that, no wonder women are going to be choosing abortion. Right. Yeah. Whereas if the response from men is, it's not, I'm here from you no matter what you choose, as if like all the burden of the decision's on her and I don't care about the outcome. Yeah. But it's like, no, like, I want to support you and this child. Yeah. We can do this together. Yeah. Right? Like, men have a role there. Now, it's not that women don't have a role. Obviously, the pregnancy affects the women more, and women need to have the right perspective as well. But it's not only women that need to have the right perspective. It's got to be a joint effort in order for it to be a healthy, holistic solution to the problem. Yeah. And the very perspective of the man would dictate how the woman feels about the whole situation. If he's like, this is a burden, it's going to have a huge influence. Yeah. She's like, well, right? I'm a burden. Like, this is you know what I mean? Right? Like, imagine how you would feel in that situation if you would be a burden to the other guy. You would feel like it, right? Especially if that's what he's expressing. Oh, it's terrible, right? Yeah, and abortion can destroy relationships because you're going through that death experience. The guy I talked to at TMU yesterday who changed his mind on abortion, he said his girlfriend had an abortion, and I think he said he paid for it. He was involved in driving her there. Wow. And afterwards she broke up with him, and she said, like, it was just so traumatic, the experience of abortion, just want to think about it, and like, it torched their relationship. Like, the abortion impacted him, it impacted her, 100%. It impacted their relationship. And like, if you're in a situation, if you're in a difficult pregnancy like that, the difference between being abandoned or hearing like, yeah, whatever you want to do, facing the whole burden of the decision and as if it doesn't make a difference either way, versus I am here to unconditionally love and support you and our child, and we can do this together. Yeah. Night and day difference in terms of the pressure you're going to feel as a woman 100%. Facing a difficult pregnancy, right? Yeah. So so the role of both parents
Yeah.
matters. Because women have a special burden, I think men have a special duty to assist and care, because we can't face that burden directly. The way that we help is by helping the mother of our child with the special burden that she needs to face directly in pregnancy.
It's the 100%. It's the support, protect role, and again, like on the flip side of burden and duty is like the fruits and the joy of pregnancy and having a baby, and then again, like what the responsibility and the virtue that would come from that as a man as well. Like which doesn't, it goes without being said, but
there's a line, I don't remember if it's where it comes from. I think I got it from the Sisters of Life, but I'm not sure who said that originally, but it's, everyone who experiences an unexpected pregnancy deserves to experience unexpected joy. Right? Like it's not to minimize the fear and the challenges, but that there's a natural joy that comes with new life. And it may be amidst suffering and difficulty as well, but there is always also a joy and a beauty in a new human being.
100%. And then, I guess, so there's a few other things that I just want to like touch base on. I wanted to go over just one thing real quick. Like, this is kind of fascinating, I guess, but maybe just briefly, in like just a couple of sentences, or I don't know, take your time. I'm in no hurry. But what are the arguments? So you mentioned, and I remember the training from Couture, it was like, you believe in human rights, and okay, we agree that who's going to say no to that? If they do, then you've got bigger. I don't know what you got on your hands, but do you believe in human rights? Do you believe that a male and a female?
I can walk through it. Yeah, absolutely. So the two core things that I would highlight from the apologetics would be what we call sort of the anchor and the sand. And then there's a whole bunch more. If you want to learn more, I recommend prolifeguys.com. My colleague Cam from Calgary runs a podcast with tons of apologetic stuff on there. So, or you could fill out the volunteer application and get training like you got. But the two core pieces of apologetics I would highlight would be the human rights argument as the anchor. So a few questions. Do you believe in human rights?
Right. Yeah.
Who gets human rights? Right. And almost everybody is going to say, yes, human rights for everyone, for all humans. Okay. First two questions. Third question. If two humans reproduce, what species is their offspring? Right? Human. And then you put it together. Especially link it with the photo evidence, if you can, the photo of an abortion victim. So if human rights are for all human beings and humans reproduce other humans, doesn't it logically follow that abortion, anchor in the photo, is a human rights violation? And that argument alone, those series of questions, can and does change people's minds. Sometimes it's a 90-second conversation. People have never thought about that, and that does the trick. Sometimes it's sort of a 90-minute conversation, but that summarizes the whole pro-life position. That human rights are for all human beings, and they should start where the human being starts, which you know from science, that fertilization.
And that's regardless of creed or background, whatever. You're human, and that's a logical.
That's looking for cultural common ground with people of any faith or no faith at all. It's based in science and human rights. So that's the anchor that centers the conversation, and that summarizes the whole apologetics, even though there's a lot more we can expand on about human rights or about science. There's more to the core training and the advanced training too. Like if someone says no to human rights, or how do you dig into the science, there's lots more there. But the human rights argument is the centerpiece, the anchor. And then the sand, the form that all of our responses take, that surrounds the anchor, the structure we're going for in all our responses. Remember I said that build a bridge, touch the heart, deliver the message? Well, it takes that form of common ground, analogy, question. Right? So somebody says, my body, my choice. Instead of just saying like, but it's not your body, right? Like that's true, but not the most effective way to communicate it. I'm going to respond with common ground, analogy, question. So, I agree that it's important to be able to have choices about our own bodies. Like that's a really important thing. Analogy. Imagine that I chose to drink alcohol, and then I chose to get behind the wheel of a car and drive.
Yeah.
Question. Would that be a problem? I was
Right.
going to say, yeah. Okay, well, why? Well, because you might hurt somebody else. I'm like, okay, I agree.
Yeah.
Right? So it seems like we would agree then that some choices are wrong if we're making choices or using our bodies in a way that could hurt somebody else.
Yeah.
So is there somebody else with abortion, right?
Yeah.
So that's just one example of common ground analogy question.
Yeah.
But common ground analogy question, we always start with something we agree with, even if it's just like, that's a really important question. But usually it's, you can get something more of substance. Like, you know, like, I agree those are really difficult circumstances. An analogy or story, one of the common analogies is to introduce the infant to make an analogy to a born child, and then a question to deliver the message. So that's just like a teaser for the essentials of the apologetics: human rights argument, common ground analogy question, and there's a bunch more in detail that we go into for basic and more advanced apologetics too.
Yeah. Real quick, while we're on the podcast, because I mean, I still know that many. There's probably about 50 or 60 on average now, which is 3 episodes. But I think people are going to be listening to this, and there are some listeners that, who knows who it is. What is an argument that you would give to people for that proves that at day one, at conception, human life and the right to life in that situation, like,
right?
Yeah.
The fastest way I find is with video evidence. If you go to ehd.org, there's stunning prenatal video, and we have, if you go to Vimeo and search abortion in 60 seconds, we have a 1-minute video. It shows abortion victims in the second 40 seconds, but the first 20 seconds is stunning prenatal video. And just when you see a child moving in the womb, like, it's obvious you're not dealing with a blob of tissue or a clump of cells. So I'll show video in conversation to speed my conversations up with visual evidence. But in terms of arguments, we do something called for, at, after fertilization. So, like, if you look at the question of when life begins, there are only 3 possibilities, right? Either it's at fertilization or it's sometime before or sometime after. Let's take them one at a time. If we look before fertilization, take just a sperm cell, right? Give it everything it needs to live, wait 9 months. What are you going to have?
Just a sperm.
Yeah. Like, we don't have a human being yet, right? So a sperm alone or an egg alone, these are human parts. We don't have a human being yet. So it's not before fertilization. After fertilization, you know, you see a baby in a stroller on the street. We know that kid didn't just appear out of nowhere at that age and stage in life. They grew from an early version of themselves, right? Take my son on the day of his birth, right? My wife can tell you he didn't just appear out of nowhere, right? He wasn't brought by a stork. Like, he grew from an earlier version of himself. And I felt him, she felt him moving around in the womb before then, right? So, you know, the first time she felt the kick, did he just appear out of nowhere at that particular age and stage at whatever it was, 20 weeks or something? No, he grew from an earlier version of himself. And you can trace someone's life back, and you realize that human beings don't appear out of nowhere at a particular age or stage. We start from the beginning and then we grow right at that first cell. And that's why every biology textbook from grade school to grad school will tell you that fertilization is the start of a new individual organism. So rather than jumping straight to the biology textbook, which is true and helpful, before, at, after fertilization is a way of showing people that, like, because people often think it's ridiculous to think that a single cell is a human being, even though that's scientifically accurate, right? But before, at, after fertilization helps people to understand that actually what's kind of ridiculous is thinking that human beings just appear out of nowhere at some particular age and stage. It makes sense. The science makes sense that we start right from the beginning.
There's almost something profound about the reaction to, like, well, that's not a human being, because the starkness of how vulnerable you are is, you don't want to face that as a human. Like, the worst thing as a human is to feel so unsafe. Well, maybe not the worst thing. I'm sure there's horrible things, but a fear humans have is to feel insecure, unsafe in things. And the fragility of life, like, there's a huge, I worked with these guys, and they thought it was humorous and there's a huge wave of movement of people who videos of people getting hurt, or even like horrible, but people like dying and stuff. And there's this like big gory culture around it, because I think it helps people process the like fragility of life. And so then what they want to do is like dehumanize life so that they don't feel so vulnerable and afraid of it. I think that plays into, oh, well, there's just like, the size of a grape. It's not, but it's like, well, of course it is. And how vulnerable that child is reveals to you how vulnerable you are and how stark life is, and how without the spiritual life, if you didn't have that, it would be quite a fearful reality. It's the same as seeing the problem and recognizing the issues of abortion and yet not having an action to take. You'd feel despair coming in on that. So even them recognizing the humanity of their, the infant in their womb would be very much like, well, what the heck am I then? So that would be an amazing sort of, like, I'm always fascinated with like the psychology of stuff. Yeah. Anyway, Blaise, man, I think that's pretty much all. I just want to make sure that I remember being like, how do people get involved, and where can they? Do you want people to reach you? Do you want people to reach out to a particular place to get involved? That type of thing.
Sure. Yeah.
We've kind of gone over how people can get involved.
Yeah, I think the best source of information is on CCBR's website, because that covers things nationally, whether you're listening from Toronto or anywhere else in Canada. Right. Endthekilling.ca.
Yep.
And if you go to the Take Action section, there's a volunteer page where you can fill out an application and get connected with your local End the Killing activism team, whichever groups are running our projects there, and connect with training. Or there's information on other programs like the Florida Abortion Awareness Project coming up in February, or a Toronto Crash Course, or crash courses in Winnipeg and Vancouver and wherever else. So endthekilling.ca. In particular, the Take Action section will connect you with ways to get involved.
Yeah. Or just go down to your local hot dog vendor and start that. I don't know. Maybe. I don't know.
You can see it. You can see on the volunteer page there too at endthekilling.ca/volunteer all of the local groups across the country.
Awesome.
The external partners who are running End the Killing activism project. Awesome. So you can see if there's one in your community or near you. Yeah. And if there isn't, maybe come to one of our programs. You'll get equipped to start one in your neighborhood.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, Blaise, I super appreciate it. This has been epic, I think, from where I'm sitting. This has been awesome, man. So
I've really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks.
Dude, thanks so much. All right, we'll end it there, and